A divine clash shook the foundations of Egypt.
Pharaoh's power reached the very heavens of Thebes.
Bricks of mud and straw built an empire's pride. Witness the dawn of the greatest liberation in history. The sea parts for a nation seeking freedom.
Toward the 15th century before our era, Egypt stood at the height of its power. A vast empire ruled by pharaohs who proclaimed themselves living gods, stretched from the cataracts of the Nile to the shores of the Mediterranean and beyond, towards Syria and Nubia. Thebes, its capital, shone with colossal temples dedicated to Amun-Ra, and the Nile, the vital artery of the entire civilization, nourished fields that sustained millions of people. But in the eastern delta, in a region called Goshen, an entire people lived under slavery, making bricks and building cities for the pharaoh. And one night, everything changed. In this video, I use modern artificial intelligence tools to bring historical paintings, maps, and ancient engravings to life, shifting camera angles, altering perspectives, and moving through these scenes in ways their original artists could never have imagined. The goal is not merely to observe the past, but to step into it, to walk through the Egypt of the pharaohs and feel what it might have been like to stand there on the most pivotal night in biblical history. And if you stay until the end, we will compare these same places with their present appearance to see what has changed and what still remains. Before setting foot in the Egypt of the Exodus, it is worth understanding how this story began. Centuries before the events we are about to explore, a man named Joseph, son of Jacob, was sold as a slave by his own brothers and taken to Egypt. Against all odds, Joseph rose to become the most powerful advisor to the Pharaoh, managing the empire's granaries during 7 years of famine that devastated the entire region. His family, the descendants of Abraham, was invited to settle in Egypt, in the land of Goshen, a fertile strip at the eastern edge of the Nile Delta. It was a good land suited for grazing and agriculture, separated from the heart of Egyptian life, yet still under the Pharaoh's authority. There, for generations, the Hebrews prospered and multiplied until they became a numerous people. What began as a temporary refuge from hunger gradually turned, over the centuries, into something very different. This scene shows the Nile Delta, as it may have appeared at that time, a mosaic of canals, cultivated fields and mud brick villages stretching as far as the eye could see. The Delta was the breadbasket of Egypt, the source of its agricultural wealth, and Goshen occupied its easternmost edge, between the Pelusiac branch of the Nile and the bitter lakes that marked the boundary with the Sinai Desert. It was a crossroads, where trade routes toward Canaan intersected with roads leading into the heart of Egypt. For the Hebrews, it was the only home they had known for centuries. For the Egyptians, it was a useful but peripheral region, inhabited by foreign shepherds whom they regarded as culturally inferior. Egyptian texts themselves refer to the Semitic peoples of the Delta as Asiatics, a term that conveyed distance and a certain measure of disdain. As generations passed, a new pharaoh ascended the throne who did not know Joseph, nor remember what he had done for Egypt. What he did see was a foreign people growing in number within his borders, and that caused him unease. The solution was slavery. The Hebrews were subjected to forced labor, compelled to make bricks with mud and straw, and to build the pharaoh's store cities. 2 of these cities are mentioned by name in the biblical texts, Pithom and Ramesses. Pithom, whose Egyptian name means House of Atum, the sun god, lay in the Wadi Tumilat, a fertile corridor linking the delta with the eastern lakes. Ramesses, the great capital of the delta, stood near present-day Kantir, upon the ruins of ancient Avaris, once the seat of the Hyksos rulers before they were expelled by the pharaohs of the 18th dynasty. Archaeologists have uncovered in these areas remains of massive walls, granaries and bricks made without straw in the upper layers, a detail that aligns with the biblical account of how the Pharaoh hardened labor conditions by demanding the same number of bricks without providing the necessary materials. Semitic names have also been found in administrative papyri from these sites, indicating that a population of Canaanite origin was indeed present in the Delta during this period. While the Hebrews suffered under the yoke of slavery in the Delta, the heart of Egyptian power beat in Thebes, the city the Greeks would later call by that name, and which the Egyptians knew as Wasit. This image takes us to the temple complex of Karnak, the most important religious center of the ancient world. Every pharaoh of the New Kingdom left his mark here, expanding sanctuaries, raising pylons and erecting obelisks in honor of Amun-Ra, king of the gods. By the time of the Exodus, Karnak was already a labyrinth of courtyards, hypostyle halls and chapels spread across an immense tract along the Nile. Its papyrus and lotus-shaped columns supported ceilings once painted with stars and birds, and in its innermost sanctuary rested the image of the god, visited only by the high priest and the pharaoh himself. The power of the priesthood of Amun rivaled that of the throne, and the wealth accumulated in these temples came from tribute, military conquests, and the labor of thousands along the Nile. Thutmose III, the great warrior pharaoh, contributed his festival hall, whose columns imitated the posts of a military tent, a permanent reminder of his campaigns in Asia. Near Karnak, connected by an avenue of ram-headed sphinxes stretching for nearly 3 kilometers, stood the temple of Luxor, dedicated to a different manifestation of Amun. Each year, during the Opet festival, the sacred image was carried in procession between the two temples aboard a ceremonial bark, an event that gathered tens of thousands and reaffirmed the pharaoh's divine authority before his people. Imagine standing there among columns that seemed to touch the sky, the scent of incense drifting through the desert air, surrounded by priests with shaven heads chanting hymns to the hidden god. For the Egyptians, these temples were not mere buildings. They were replicas of the cosmos itself, models of the moment of creation when the first mound emerged from the primordial waters. The pylons symbolized the horizon. The floor rose gradually toward the sanctuary to evoke the primeval hill, and the plant-shaped columns recalled the marshes from which the world was born. On the western bank of Thebes, opposite the temples of Karnak and Luxor, lay the royal necropolis. Hidden in a solitary valley among limestone hills, the pharaohs of the New Kingdom carved their tombs into the rock, abandoning the pyramids of their ancestors for a more secret and secure form of burial against looters. The Valley of the Kings housed the mummified bodies of the most powerful rulers on earth, surrounded by treasures meant to accompany them into eternal life. Nearby, the mortuary temple of Hatshepsut, the woman who ruled as pharaoh for 2 decades, rose in terraces against the cliffs of Deir el-Bahari, a monument of elegance unmatched in all Egypt. Its reliefs depicted trading expeditions to the distant land of Punt and offerings to the gods that legitimized her claim to the throne. This was the world ruled by the Pharaoh of the Exodus, a world of monumental splendor built upon human labor, tribute from conquered nations, and absolute faith in a divine order that placed the Pharaoh at the summit of creation. And yet, within that Egypt that seemed invincible, something was about to break. According to the biblical account, when the Pharaoh ordered the killing of all newborn Hebrew males to curb the growth of that people, a mother placed her son in a papyrus basket coated with pitch and set him among the reeds of the Nile. The Pharaoh's daughter found the child, adopted him, and named him Moses, a name that echoes the Hebrew word for drawn out of the waters. Moses grew up in the palaces of the Delta, likely educated in warfare, administration, and hieroglyphic writing, as any prince of the court would have been. But at 40 years old, after killing an Egyptian overseer who was beating a Hebrew slave, he fled to the desert of Midian and spent another 4 decades as a shepherd in the mountains of Sinai. It was there, before a bush that burned without being consumed on Mount Horeb, that he received the command to return to Egypt and free his people. He was 80 years old. What followed was a confrontation between the power of the Pharaoh and a force no army could restrain. Moses and his brother Aaron appeared before the throne and demanded the release of the Hebrews. The Pharaoh refused. Then the plagues began. This scene shows the Nile, that sacred artery the Egyptians revered as the blood of Osiris, turned red, depriving them of drinking water and killing the fish that fed the villages of the delta. The Pharaoh's priests attempted to replicate the wonder with their secret arts, but they could not reverse it. Then came the frogs, emerging from the river in numbers that invaded houses, bedrooms, and ovens. A blow against Heket, the frog-headed goddess who protected childbirth. Next came gnats rising from the dust of the earth itself. Then swarms of insects that darkened the air, a plague upon livestock that killed entire herds, boils covering the skin of humans and animals, hail mingled with fire that destroyed crops, locusts devouring what the hail had left standing. And finally, a thick and impenetrable darkness covering Egypt for 3 days. A darkness that, according to the text, could be felt a direct challenge to Ra, the sun god, the supreme deity embodied by the Pharaoh himself. Each of these plagues struck not only daily life in Egypt, but the very foundations of its belief system. Egyptian religion rested on the certainty that the gods controlled the forces of nature and that the Pharaoh, as divine intermediary, ensured cosmic order. When the Nile turned to blood, it was not only an ecological disaster, it was the humiliation of Hapi, Osiris, and Khnum, guardian of the river. When darkness covered the land, it was the defeat of Ra. The Pharaoh's magicians, who at first imitated the early signs, were rendered powerless from the 3rd plague onward, admitting that what they saw was the finger of a power beyond their arts. And all the while, in the land of Goshen where the Hebrews lived, no hail fell, no darkness came, no livestock died, no insects entered. The distinction was clear, systematic, and deliberate. But the final night had not yet come. This image places us in the hours before what Jewish tradition calls Pesach, Passover. Moses had given precise instructions to every Hebrew family. Take a lamb without blemish on the 10th day of the 1st month, keep it for 4 days, slaughter it at twilight on the 14th day, and mark the doorposts and lintel with its blood. That night they were to eat the roasted lamb with bitter herbs and unleavened bread, dressed and ready, staff in hand, prepared to depart at any moment. For at midnight, something would pass through all the land of Egypt, and in every house without blood on the door, the firstborn would die, from the son of the Pharaoh seated on his throne to the son of the prisoner in the dungeon, and even the firstborn of the livestock. It was the 10th and final plague, the one that would finally break the will of the most powerful man on earth. Imagine that night in the delta, silence shattered by a wail spreading from house to house, from village to village, a collective cry Egypt had never known and would never know again. There was not a home without a dead. In the palace, the Pharaoh himself discovered that his heir had fallen. That same night, before dawn, he summoned Moses and Aaron and ordered them to leave, to take their people, their flocks, and all they possessed, and never return. The Egyptians, terrified that they would all die if the Hebrews remained a moment longer, urged them to depart and handed over objects of gold, silver, and clothing, anything to hasten their immediate departure. Thus, a people who had entered Egypt as refugees, fleeing famine, left as a nation on the move, laden with the wealth of their former masters. And so the exodus began. From Ramesses in the heart of the delta, hundreds of thousands set out eastward, carrying unleavened bread because there had been no time for the dough to rise, herds of sheep and goats, and the goods given by the Egyptians in their desperation. They headed towards Sukkoth in the Wadi Tumilat, following the natural corridor leading into the desert and the eastern lakes. A pillar of cloud guided them by day and a pillar of fire by night. They did not take the most direct route to Canaan, which followed the Mediterranean coast, but was guarded by Egyptian fortresses and garrisons. It was a path that led them into the wilderness, away from watched roads, into the unknown. But the Pharaoh changed his mind. Grief gave way to political calculation. He had lost his slave labor force. He prepared 600 of his best war chariots, along with the rest of Egypt's cavalry, and set out in pursuit. The Egyptian army was the most feared military machine of the ancient world. Its light chariots, each crewed by a driver and an armed warrior, could move swiftly across open terrain and had conquered entire nations through that tactic. The Hebrews, trapped between the approaching army behind them and waters blocking their path ahead, believed they would die. Some reproached Moses for bringing them out of Egypt, only to perish in the desert. Moses answered that they should remain calm, that they would not need to act, that the battle did not belong to them. He raised his staff over the waters, and according to the account, a strong east wind blew all night and divided the sea, opening a path of dry ground with walls of water on both sides. The people crossed. When the Egyptian chariots attempted to follow at dawn, their wheels bogged down in the seabed, panic spread among the drivers, and the waters returned to their place, burying the Pharaoh's army without leaving a single survivor. It is the oldest and most influential liberation story in Western civilization. Each year, during the celebration of Pesach, Jewish families around the world relive that night at the Seder meal, where each participant must see himself as though he personally had come out of Egypt. The Hebrew word for Egypt, Mitzrayim, literally means narrow place or place of oppression, and the story of the Exodus has become a universal symbol of the struggle for freedom. It is not merely a religious narrative. It is the foundation upon which entire traditions of resistance, hope, and redemption were built, from abolitionist movements to civil rights struggles in the 20th century. Now I want to bring you to the present and show how these places look today. If you ever have the opportunity to visit Egypt, you will find that many of the sites we have explored are still standing, transformed by millennia, yet still recognizable. Thank you for being here, and if you have ideas or requests for future cities, share them in the comments. Let us take a look. The eastern Nile Delta, where the land of Goshen once stretched, is now one of the most densely populated agricultural regions in Egypt. The landscape has changed profoundly with the construction of the Suez Canal in the 19th century, which cut across the isthmus the Hebrews crossed in their flight. The bitter lakes and Lake Timza remain, but the ancient escape routes are now flanked by modern cities such as Ismailia and by industrial infrastructure that would have been unimaginable to the fugitives of that night. The site of ancient Ramesses lies near modern Qantir, where excavations led by Austrian teams have uncovered the remains of a great city with horse stables, metalworking workshops, and administrative structures. Little remains visible on the surface, as much of the stone was moved in antiquity to nearby Tanis, but ground-penetrating radar has confirmed the scale of what was once the most important capital of the Delta. Karnak remains one of the most impressive archaeological sites on the planet. The columns of its hypostyle hall rise more than 20 meters high, and though the vibrant colors that once covered them have faded over millennia, the sheer scale of the place still inspires awe in visitors. The Temple of Luxor, once connected by the Avenue of Sphinxes, has been partially restored in recent years, and today it is possible to walk between the two temples along the same path the priests followed during the Opet festival more than 3,000 years ago. The Valley of the Kings continues to reveal secrets. More than 60 tombs have been discovered so far, and archaeologists believe there may be more hidden beneath the rock. The wall paintings inside many of these tombs preserve vivid colors that defy time, depicting scenes of the soul's journey into the afterlife with a detail and vitality that still captivate those who see them. As for the sea the Hebrews crossed, its exact location remains the subject of debate among archaeologists and biblical scholars. The Hebrew text calls it Yam Suf, which literally translates as Sea of Reeds, a term that could refer to one of the lakes of the Suez Isthmus, rather than the Red Sea proper. What we do know is that the landscape of this region has changed profoundly, both through natural processes and through human intervention with the canal, making it difficult to reconstruct with certainty the precise geography of that night. What has not changed is the weight of this story. Whether it is regarded as a literal historical account, a collective memory shaped by centuries of oral tradition, or a foundational myth of deep spiritual meaning, the Exodus remains the starting point of Jewish identity, a pillar of Christian faith, and a narrative also recognized in Islam, where Musa is one of the most revered prophets of the Quran. It is a story that has crossed borders, languages, and millennia, and that continues to resonate wherever someone struggles for freedom against the power that seeks to oppress them. I truly appreciate that you have watched this video. Your ideas, comments, and constructive feedback genuinely shape what comes next. Feel free to leave a comment below. Until next time.